Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the latest international webinar from the World Federation of Athletic Training and Therapy. Thank you very much for being with us this evening. It's always great to know who we've got in the room. So if you'd like to introduce yourself in the chat, let us know your name, where you're tuning in from, and your background, that would be great because it gives us an idea who's with us. I'll run through some quick housekeeping and then I'll hand you over to our host, So we will be recording the session this evening and it'll be available to view on the World Federation website in about 48 hours time. So if there is anything that you'd like to come back and catch up on, you can do that there. If you have any questions as we move through the session, please pop them in the Q&A box rather than the chat. You can also view the questions that have already been posted and you can upvote them to give those questions higher priority. We'll be doing the Q&A session at the end, but please do feel free to post your questions as we move through the session. Afterwards, when you do leave, there's a short evaluation form and we'd really appreciate it if you could take 2 minutes of your time to fill that out for us because it helps us to improve the way that we run these events in the future, and your feedback is really valuable for that. We'll also be sending out a certificate. Again, please bear with us, you'll get that on an email within 24 to 48 hours after the event. I will pass you over to our superstar host, Glenn, and I do hope you enjoy the session.
Well, thank you very much, Oliver, and thank you to you specifically, Oliver, for working on all the logistics of putting on our webinars, and to WFATT to be offering us access to your webinar services. And so we really appreciate that. Without WFATT's support, we probably wouldn't be able to be as successful as we are with these webinars. I want to thank and want to welcome all of you as well to this international webinar. We are very excited about this particular webinar, as we have been with all the other ones. They've been also very successful, and this one is equally so. And tonight we were going to be looking at athletic therapy in a maybe in a bit more of a unique or different setting that many of you may be accustomed to. We have been doing actually a little bit of exposure for some of our athletic trainers, athletic therapists throughout the world who are working in unique environments. We did a podcast where we had, I think, 5 or 6 ATs working in various different milieus in the military and in industry, et cetera. So if you want to get a little bit more in terms of a little more of diversity, I would welcome you to go to the World Federation website, to the podcast site, and you can reload that one as well. And it was a very, very well received and very interesting website. But today, as I said, we are really blessed to have 4 people here who are experts in their field in the area of working with Paralympic athletes, with the disabled, and as I will introduce Mike as an Olympian. We're very excited to have Mike come in and speak to us as well as an Olympian at the Paralympic level. So we will be introducing all of them. The format today is, we wanted to keep it more informal. We wanted to bring you a bit more of a fireside chat, a format where people, rather than having throw PowerPoint slides up and you're trying to memorize the slides and trying to remember all these things, is just to have a discussion. So we've invited our 3 guests, our 3 athletic trainer therapists, to be able to give their experiences. And as I indicated, we'll hear from Mike at the very end. So to begin with, I'm going to invite Bryanna Howard to speak. And Bryanna is she's employed through the University of Utah Health, and she is the head athletic trainer at Mountain Ridge High School in Utah, USA. She's an adjunct professor in athletic training education at the University of Utah as well. In her spare time, she works as an instructor with the Wasatch Adaptive Sports and Sports, a nonprofit organization based at Snowbird Mountain Resort in Utah. I'm sure that's a beautiful place. And that they provide, this particular organization provides both summer and winter recreation opportunities for the individuals with disabilities. So Bryanna comes with an awful lot of experience working with athletes with disabilities at the developmental level. And we're really pleased to have Bryanna present today. So Bryanna, I'm going to give you the floor. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks, fun. So just to introduce this topic, I have never worked with Paralympians, but I do work with adaptive athletes. And so we're going to definitely focus on kind of the grassroots before we get started and moving forward to more Paralympians here a little bit later in the webinar. So just a little bit of context. I've been an athletic trainer for 3.5 years now. I graduated in 2018 with my bachelor's in athletic training, and that's how I became certified. And while I was doing my undergrad, my initial interest in an adaptive athletes came actually having an internship at a rehabilitation hospital in Chicago, again, USA, where I'm from. It's normally a PT internship, but I just kind of had an interest and just decided to pick my battles and apply for it, and was actually accepted into a pretty competitive rehabilitation program. And so what we did that summer when I had my internship was we worked with just a variety of individuals with disabilities, whether they were stroke survivors, whether they had multiple sclerosis, spinal cord injuries, really any sort of injury you could think of that kind of led them away from able-bodied persons. That's what the people we worked with. We even worked with someone who called herself a dinosaur because she had polio. So we had a lot of different individuals that we worked with. And what we did is we really were just like physical therapists, not to say that I am one because I am not, but the stuff that we did was we worked with physiotherapists specifically, and they just set up individualized rehabilitation programs to get the individuals that we were working with back to whatever goals there were. So let's say some wanted to, have that big goal of learning to walk again. Well, we just decided to see what we could do because we didn't know their limitations. We just wanted to see how their bodies could respond post-injury in most cases. And even some, they wanted to learn how to ride a bike again. They wanted to learn how to brush their teeth again. It was anything from like super small, almost occupational therapy, all the way up to I want to become an athlete again, just with my abilities that I have. And so that initial interest just kind of shot forward what I wanted to do long term, which is to work with adaptive athletes, not necessarily in like the Paralympic setting, but more of just like the grassroots, like people with disabilities who want to be physically active, just figuring out what we can do in terms of their ability level to get them back to their goals. So that kind of shot forward to me now living in Utah, completing my master's out here and working with Wasatch Adaptive Sports. So again, they're a nonprofit focused on working with individuals with disabilities. And just to make this a little more, so to speak, interactive, I'm going to just talk about a few case studies specifically where I saw athletic training working with those individuals specifically. So the first one will be a little more straightforward. The second one will be a little more interesting and unique. So the first one is going to be with a stroke survivor. So we have this big bike race called the Summit Challenge that we do in Utah every year, and it's supports a major organization out here to just have more money, to have more opportunities for people with disabilities. And so we had individuals with disabilities participating in anywhere from a 1 mile bike ride to on a 100-mile bike ride. And so I had an individual who she's 65 and she wanted to participate in the 50-mile bike ride. So we got her trained ready for this entire season. And then we had our big bike race day. So she was in a recumbent bike, which has 3 wheels. So she's sitting back a little more on like a 2-wheel that probably most of us ride. And so I was on my 2-wheel. She had her son on a 2-wheel as well, and she was on her recumbent bike. And so we got to probably mile 32 or so. And actually, we'll talk a little bit about her things that she's dealing with. So with her being a stroke survivor, she can't see out of the left side of either of her eyes. So she kind of has a difference in vision. So if you're if you're looking straight forward, just picture that you can't see out of the left side of either of your eyes. It kind of, you have your right side, but you really can't see anything from your nose to the left at all. So just starting with that, it kind of changes how we approach the road because it was a road race, right? So we had to like be by her in certain ways and coach her in different ways too, to see when people were coming on her right, see when people were coming on her left, especially because she also can't hear out of her left ear, and we were riding on the right side of the road, which means if you can't hear out of your left ear, yikes. So it made it very interesting to just have the knowledge of her limitations, but then also have the ability to have an open line of communication. And I think working as in sports therapy and being athletic therapist, we have a really good way to communicate with people. And I think that definitely kind of was the reason why I was put with that student for this day. And so we were doing pretty successful. Unfortunately, we did have a crash and we were unable to complete the full 50 miles. And it was very interesting because with her crash, she landed on her shoulder, but she landed on her head. And it was, if you didn't know anything about her, you would assume kind of the worst, like she wasn't able to communicate well because one would assume probably because she has a traumatic brain injury, but she has aphasia because she had a stroke. So just having the knowledge of like an individual with a disability and what her limitations are kind of made it less scary of a situation as it could have been. Yes, she crashed. Yes, it was scary, but because meaning me and her son, knew who she was, knew her limitations, it made it more of it didn't make it as scary of a situation as it could have been. Yes, she hit her head. Yes, she did have a concussion, but it was nothing that was worse. And she's, in fact, it was 3.5 weeks ago and she's already back biking. She was biking 2 weeks ago because that's just, she wanted to get back on her bike. She wanted to get back. So she's telling me to train for the 50 mile next year, and I have to continue myself to training to get to do that as well. Another individual that I'd like to talk about is, he is 4 years old and he has a syndrome called CHAMPS1. So CHAMPS1 is a multi-system disease that affects your mitochondrial DNA. And so it's kind of almost like it affects multi-organs, it affects multi-systems, and it's very, very rare. And so this is the first student we've ever had. There's only, I think, 3 people in the United States that has this syndrome specifically. And this kiddo was able to learn how to walk because he was able to ski with us when he was 2 years old. So our founder of Wasatch Adaptive Sports, we met him. We were able to set up kind of a way for him to ski. So he's standing up, he's on upright skis, but he also is using outriggers. So those are just basically little baby skis that you hold on either side. And that kind of gave this kiddo, as I call him, because I can't, tell him your real name, right? The ability to just be on his own and actually be able to ski. And so we did a big video interview with him and his family, and that was one of the last lessons we had of this season. And he used the outriggers, but he didn't really like them. He usually just threw them away. And so the next thing we tried was just a really long stick. We call it a bamboo pole, but it's really just basically a stick that you can find in nature anywhere, for him to hold on and for his instructor to hold on. And that kind of gave him the ability to feel comfortable skiing because he knew that he was with somebody else. So what we decided to do, given the amount that he could balance and kind of be on his own, is more of just a scary thing because he's only 4 years old. It's like trying to hold mom's hand the whole time. Well, in this case, he was holding the stick. And so what we ended up doing, especially during that video, was because I felt like he was balancing so well, him letting go of the stick was scary, but me letting go of the stick while he was distracted by mom actually made him ski on his own. And so the beauty of not saying that anybody has limitations kind of showed that, hey, he's got good balance, he's just nervous. But nerves and fear shouldn't really, disable us from doing things, right? So it just kind of gives us the ability to be open to address different things. So just in summary, talking about just very specific individuals with more of the grassroots, working with people with disabilities, is I think, although I don't work as an athletic trainer specifically with people with disabilities right now, I think my skills and really all of our skills here, that's why you're sitting here learning about this, right? Our skills of anatomy, of just the ability to communicate and have an open chain of communication with your athletes, especially in terms of working with people with disabilities, because they're ultimately the expert because they're living with it every day. But we have the expert in other ways, right? In anatomy, in understanding understanding and doing arts and crafts. I tell my high school kids every day, the reason why sometimes they play is because I make a shin guard out of a garbage can. Like, it's just really random things and just kind of keeping it open. And that's even more true working with individuals with disabilities, because sometimes there's things that can happen that just aren't out in the market yet. But keeping an open line of communication, just seeing what things are possible, what things need to become possible if they can be, can really open up to having individuals with disabilities able to participate in more physical recreation, just because we're willing to kind of see the things that haven't been approached yet and just find different ways to make it possible.
Thank you very much, Bryanna. That was awesome. I'm even more impressed now when I hear the fact that you really are an expert in the field of a very rare disease, of which there's only 3 in the whole United States. So what an experience that must have been, and to be able to share that with people, that it's great, and to be able to use your talents and your skills in a very unique way. That's amazing. We will have opportunities to ask more questions at the end, so stay tuned and don't go anywhere, Bryanna. We want to keep you here. Now, our next speaker is Jessica Tidswell. And Jessica is a licensed athletic trainer, board certified sports physical therapist, and a certified strength and conditioning specialist. She worked with the U.S. Ski and Snowboard Association and worked privately, actually, for the professional free skier Tanner Hall for 2 years. And she's also worked as the head PT ATC for the USA Nordic Sports Organization, including the ski jumping and Nordic combined. And she's a senior classifier with the International Paralympic Committee and volunteers her time to serve on a special advisory panel for the International Paralympic Committee to classify athletes for alpine skiing and snowboarding around the world. So if you saw athletes competing at the Olympics in terms of their various classifications, Jessica's the expert in that area as well. But we're going to ask her to speak on her experiences working at the elite level with disabled athletes, and sort of build on where we're going from our Paralympian. So Jessica, again, I will give you the floor and welcome.
Hi, everyone. And thank you so much for having me, and thank you for reading my bio. I always hate hearing about myself, and I honestly hate using the word expert, because as I tell my students, I'm still learning every day. But I do have some experience in this area, and some of you might be interested to learn that I've been a physical therapist for 19 years and an athletic trainer for 11. So I really, really wanted to be an athletic trainer. So I did things backwards, if you will. A lot of people do athletic therapy or athletic training first and then go on to be a physio. So what started, just to kind of continue with how Bryanna was doing things, what started my interest in the adaptive side of things was I was doing one of my PT residencies or internships in my PT career or PT school training. And I happened to be sent out for 5 months to this place called Salt Lake City in 2002. When the Olympics and Paralympics were going on. And I was able to volunteer for the Paralympic Games. And that basically started my involvement and my interest in the Paralympics. Fast forward a few years, and I was able to get a job with the US, what was then called US Disabled Alpine Ski Team. It's now called Adaptive Ski Team or Paralympic Team. And I took on, because I was hired as the physical therapist, because I was not yet an athletic trainer, I took on the role of assistant coach, of team manager, and physical therapist, all for the bargain price of, well, we won't talk about that because all of you listening would be like, you made what? Not very much, I'll tell you that much. And so off I went, and I had a background in ski racing. I was a ski racer for 18 years. And for me, working with the adaptive world was sort of a great marriage of physio and ski racing. And I realized I had a lot to learn, and I didn't know much about the Paralympic or adaptive world. And so I went to seminars and learned from my athletes, and was able to work for two different times with the Paralympic Alpine Ski Team. And I left in the middle because I supported my husband transitioning to a different career, had to make a little more money. But Anyway, when I became involved, I realized, okay, there's classification and what does all of this mean? And I started shadowing the classifiers, and this was in 2004. Now, I shadowed them, but because I had a conflict of interest in that I worked for one of the national teams, I couldn't be a classifier. So after I stopped working with the national teams, I started to train as an international classifier, and have been doing that since 2009. And classifiers are officials of the International Paralympic Committee, and we're volunteers. So what we do, if you're not familiar with classification in the Paralympic world, is basically when an athlete wants to get into the sport, we basically put like whatever the sport is, and we'll hear all about sports from a wonderful Paralympian who is with us today. But each sport has their different rules or classifications. And so I know the most about alpine skiing and snowboard. And based on the eligible impairment types, then what we do is we go in and we do a medical examination. And we basically look at what is the athlete's impairment that they have, and then what are their abilities, and how does their impairment impact their functional ability to perform in that given sport. And then we break it down. There are sport classes. So essentially, the classifiers are trying to put the folks in the correct sport class so that sport can be as fair as possible. In recent years, you may have seen in the news that there are some sports that have more issues with fair classification than others because of the use of prosthetics or other things, or people who try to cheat the classifying system. In alpine skiing and snowboard, we've been very lucky and haven't had to deal with a lot of that. But that's, what I continue to do to be involved, because now I transitioned over into the University of Utah, where I currently teach in athletic training. And I'm lucky enough to have Bree here as a colleague. She's on an adjunct instructor in our faculty as well. But you all might be interested to know that we recently started teaching in our master's program the adaptive athlete in athletic training. So that is now in a course for us, and I'm teaching it for the first time, and it happens to be in the first 7 weeks of our semester, and our semester started on August 23rd. Coincidentally, Tokyo Paralympics were going on during that time. So our students got to tune in and watch the Tokyo Paralympic Games and watch replays and see what was going on. So that's very exciting. And of course, in the coming years, they'll watch videos because it's a fall semester course. Now, I did not classify any of the folks in Tokyo because those are classifiers vary from sport to sport, because you have to be familiar with the sport and with the rules and with the different testing systems. But the folks that are going to be this winter in China, in Beijing, those would be the folks that I may or may not have classified, because we do have a team of classifiers. And in fact, this year leading into a Paralympic year, one of the challenges we're facing is, can we travel and who can go where to get to classification events leading up to the games, because some of our athletes need to be seen before the games. So that's one of the things that we're working on. But so yes, I have worked for 2 different years with our US Alpine Paralympic teams. And I've also been lucky enough to go to 3 different Paralympic Games, 2002 in Salt Lake City as a volunteer, 2010 to Vancouver as part of Team USA, where I served as a coach, and 2014 in Sochi, where I was part of the International Federation's delegation, serving as an official as part of the classification team. And I can tell you that it was one of the, I've been to multiple big ceremonies and games and things as an athletic trainer, and walking in with Team USA into the Vancouver Stadium was one of the best moments in my life because you're part of something bigger than yourself, and being there to support those athletes to achieve their dreams and goals. I can't describe the feeling. And even being there as part of the International Federation, just it's such a glorious time. If you ever have a chance to volunteer, if the Paralympics are coming to your city, if they're coming to your country, sign up, get involved, join the movement. You will never look back. And that's my plug.
Well, thank you very much, Jessica. That was very, very interesting. And it really sounded a lot like a recruitment thing, because I loved what you talked about at the very end and saying, you know, get involved. And it's a really enriching experience, both personally and professionally. So I'm glad. And I have to say that I'm not at all surprised that the highlight of your life would have been in Vancouver and in Canada, because that's sort of my home country. And I love Vancouver. So I'm glad you were going that way, because if you didn't, if you would have said it was Sochi, I would have brought you back to Vancouver. So thanks very much for doing that. And so again, we'll have an opportunity to have more questions as we move along. So we're kind of moving along the uniqueness of the spectrum of working towards the Paralympics. And we're very, very fortunate again now to have Marnie McRoberts come and join us. And Marnie is a member of the Canadian Athletic Therapists Association. She's a certified athletic therapist with the CATA, and she's a registered kinesiologist in Canada. And she's a Red Cross certified first aid and first responder instructor. So she's well-versed and got an expanse of skill sets. She's been a lead medical practitioner with Wheelchair Rugby Canada for over 9 years. And she's worked with the Canadian Wheelchair Rugby team at the 2020 Tokyo Olympics just last month. So she's just getting over jet lag, coming back again. And Marnie is also a part-time assistant professor at York University in Toronto, Canada. And we're very, very pleased to have Marnie to come and share her experiences both prior to and during the Paralympics. So Marnie, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And thank you for having me today and for this opportunity. I agree, it always feels weird when somebody reads out your bio. So I'm going to kind of add on to what's been talked about today. My experience has been kind of unique. I used to work in a prep school environment and just applied for a job in parasport on a whim with the wheelchair rugby team and was accepted with no experience. So I had a lot to learn pretty quick. So it's been a bit of a journey over the past 9 years. So I could talk forever. I'll try to keep it to the 15 minutes, but I just wanted to kind of give everybody a bit of an overview of what my job is and some of the differences that you might not be aware of when you're working with persons with a disability. So I thought I'd start by giving everybody just a brief introduction of the sport of wheelchair rugby, because my knowledge in disability sport is specific to rugby. So I thought that would be important for everybody to understand the athlete population that I get to work with. So wheelchair rugby is a sport specifically for quadriplegic athletes, meaning that the athletes must have an impairment in at least 3 of their limbs. Sometimes it's all 4, but at least 3. Sport was originally designed for athletes with a spinal cord injury, but it opened up a bunch of years ago to include a variety of disability types like amputees, athletes with cerebral palsy, muscular dystrophy, etc. And the disability types could be congenital or acquired. So a majority of the athletes in the sport, especially in Canada, have spinal cord injuries to their cervical spines. So that usually results in paralysis from about nipple line and down, and can affect the arms to different degrees depending on the level of injury. And of course, whether or not the injury is complete, so straight through the spinal cord, or incomplete, where various fibers might still be intact, which will impact both motor and sensory functions. So our sport also has a classification system. We range from a 0.5 to a 3.5. And as an AT, you get the wonderful experience of being involved in classification. But I thought I would just describe the range of disabilities in the sport just to give you a perspective. So our 0.5 athletes with spinal cord injury will have no hand function, no wrist function, no forearms, no muscles in the forearms. Biceps will be intact and they should be pretty strong. but no triceps. And then it starts to get a little bit better at the shoulder and neck level. And a couple of fibers of pecs may be intact, but it's certainly not a functional muscle group. So a lower level of disability at the 0.5 class, and it goes up by 0.5s up into our 3.5 class, which would be our most able athletes. And in our sport, that class tends to be more of our amputees, because those athletes, whatever they have, is fully functional. So our 3.5 athlete, to put it in perspective, has amputations just above the knuckles and half of a thumb on both hands, and leg amputations just below the knee. So people that might have an interest in working in high performance sport, I can say that there's not really major differences between able-bodied high performance and para high performance programs, aside from the fact that Paralympic sport is obviously better. Just joking, but athletes might have different physical or physiological considerations. And the biggest thing, which has been mentioned in each presentation, is kind of thinking outside the box and having to get a bit of creative in your approaches as an athletic therapist. So my role as lead medical practitioner, I'm basically responsible for all things medical in both a decentralized and centralized environment. Our team has athletes that live all over Canada. We're not a centralized program, so we're in a normal year together about once a month, but we have to travel to see each other. And the rest of the time we're completely separated. So when we are in camps and competitions, my job's a little bit more straightforward, a typical AT job working in sport. But when we're decentralized, my role is a little different, where I'm helping athletes coordinate care they need from home, maybe coordinating prehab, and we get to work with a big group of IST, integrated support team, when we're in high performance sport. So people like physiologists, mental performance coaches, video analysts, et cetera. So I kind of help coordinate everything as it relates to our overall periodization plan. So getting into thinking outside the box a bit, I thought I would talk about some of the different skill sets you might need to have in working in disability sport, and some of the differences or things to consider or be aware of when working with persons with a disability. And I'll touch on some things, but Mike, who will be speaking next, is one of my athletes, and he can certainly give a better perspective as an athlete, so he'll touch on some of the points as well. I thought I would start with what assessments look like. And I like to tell people that everything is exactly the same, but also completely different. And what I mean by that is you're not changing your approach or what you want to do. But as an example, we often compare right to left or affected versus unaffected side. There might not be an unaffected side to assess, so you need to adapt. You're often looking for feedback. So how does this feel? Well, how does what feel? If you're talking below the lesion level, that athlete might not even know that you are poking at their knee. So you are losing opportunities to get that kind of feedback. You might get some feedback, but it might not be what you're looking for. And same with range of motion and strength. Below the level of injury, it's usually not an option to assess or get that feedback. And even above the level of injury, there's often so many asymmetries that you're not comparing side to side, and assessments can be difficult. So having baseline information and having a strong understanding of your athletes before they have an opportunity to get injured is important, so that you can compare those results as the norm for when something might happen. With my role, I kind of rely really heavily on palpation skills. So if you've seen and felt a lot of injuries or dysfunctions before, that certainly helps. But it's been mentioned also in this chat, the need to work together to figure out how you can help the athlete, because the athlete will know best about their abilities and what they can and can't do. So it's quite a bit of, I want to do this, but obviously we can't. How can we adapt this to make this happen? And then different disability types bring on different challenges as well. With amputees, a lot of the times where the amputation takes place, there's some fragile tissue, scar tissue in there, sometimes joint contractures and stuff like that that you need to be aware of. So I thought it would be interesting to touch on some physiological differences with the athletes too, because it's stuff you don't think about. And I work with a higher level of disability with quadriplegics in the sport, so it's not as common to all para sports as well. So when we're talking about the spinal cord injured athletes, I wanted to touch base on something called autonomic dysreflexia that people may or may not have heard of before. The very non-sciencey explanation is if something happens below your level of injury that you may not be able to feel, the body will still adapt and have a response to let you know that something is wrong. It's a syndrome kind of similar to a shock, where it's often an onset of really high blood pressure that can happen when something like bad or uncomfortable is happening below the level of injury. And I use air quotes there because it could be something as simple as I put my shoe on and my socks are bunched up, and I wasn't aware of that, because if I did that, I would, shimmy my sock and make it more comfortable for myself. Or maybe I broke my femur. And quite often, the fun part as an AT is it presents the exact same. So something's wrong. You don't know if they broke their femur. You don't know if they're sitting on a pocket. It could be a variety of different things that kind of cause it. And I'm sure Mike might touch on a little bit of what that is as well, but often presents very individual, but more commonly associated with headache, a flushed red face, and a key piece that often happens, not always, is sweating above the level of injury, which is a transition piece into thermoregulation, which I want to just chat quickly about next, because my athletes with higher spinal cord injuries do not sweat. So they don't have the ability to sweat because the injury, the lesion site is higher than the level that controls thermoregulation. So if all of a sudden my athletes start sweating, that's a sign that they could be dysreflexic. So I'll transition there into thermoregulation. So my athletes don't sweat. So part of our jobs as athletic therapists with these athletes is to help control internal temperature. So applying lots of cooling techniques on and off the court to try to maintain a temperature that, one, doesn't create a heat-related emergency, and also keeps athletes in an ideal temperature to be able to maintain a level of performance throughout a full game, especially like when you're in Tokyo and it's like 100 degrees outside and what have you. So I know Mike's going to touch on the different kind of cooling techniques that we do both on and off the court, but it is a huge part of what we do specifically in wheelchair rugby with our spinal cord injured athletes. And a couple of other quick considerations. Wound care is something that is, part of what we do as ATs, but comes with different challenges when working in disability sport, especially with high performance programs that tend to do a lot of traveling. There's often a lot of prolonged sitting on flights and buses, and you're in your day chair forever, then in your sport chair, and it's a lot. So pressure sores are quite common, or can be quite common in the sport, because when you're losing muscle function, you don't have that padding in place between the skin and bone. So friction can create some pressure sores. And infection is a little bit more prevalent as well. So as an AT, you get a lot more experience than you would in different environments with skin health and trying to manage those situations. And the final kind of chronic health thing I wanted to mention is related to shoulder health and the importance of maintaining strong shoulders, because it tends to be a link to independence for a lot of the athletes, like not being able to push your manual chair and do activities of daily living. It would obviously be really detrimental. So maintaining strong shoulder health through prehab and band work and making correct return to play decisions and not coming back too early are really important in the sport. So I think Mike's going to touch on a bit of that as well. So I thought I would end my little chat with just a quick overview of the role of an AT at a Paralympic Games. It is quite different, at least in Canada, working specifically with one team versus being part of the core program, because you follow your team everywhere and you're kind of their point of contact for anything medical. It was obviously really different this year with COVID, testing daily. We were masked even outdoors, which was a lot of fun in the heat and walking long distances and trying to stay cool. Constantly disinfecting and a lot of protocols in place with COVID, which made it interesting, but still a fun games to go to. I've been lucky enough to have been at Rio as well, so I had a bit of a comparison, but Tokyo certainly did a good job of trying to keep it as safe as possible. But I thought I'd review just kind of a typical day for me in Tokyo, because I always laugh everybody. It sounds so glamorous, and it is certainly like an opportunity of a lifetime and a lot of fun. And Mike's already laughing because he knows what the days kind of involve. But my day usually starts off with a urinalysis, either doing it myself or helping with our physiologist with urinalysis to make sure that everybody is hydrated from the day before and starting the game off right. And then followed by some treatment sessions in the clinic, usually the overflow from the night before, because we're finishing late in the day for whoever couldn't get in. And then we're into our pre-practice or pre-game routine. So a lot of the wound care happens there, any pre-game stretching, helping with the nutrition and hydration, PB&Js, you're kind of doing a little bit of everything in these roles. Games are quite busy with all of our cooling strategies, anything medical that comes up, nutrition, hydration, picking the athletes off the court because our sport is full contact and chairs topple over often on the court. And then post-game, a lot of the opposite of the pre-game with making sure everybody has what they need. Then you get to travel back to the village, do more treatment, do recovery. We tend to travel with game readies and Normatex. We have ice tubs available and things like that, and get everybody what they need to recover, again, depending on time of day. Then we had our lovely COVID protocols. So everybody was doing their testing at night, so we didn't have to wake up too early in the morning. And then you get to get up and repeat it the next day. So super long days when you're in Paralympic Village. Our sport's super condensed. So we have 5 games in 5 days and we're out kind of a thing. So it's high impact and a lot going on there. So that is a very broad overview of kind of my role. I know Mike's going to touch on a few things in more detail, but certainly if anyone has any questions on anything I touched on, please feel free to ask at the end. Thank you.
Well, thank you very, very much, Marnie. That's a great insight into your role. For example, the day in the life of athletic therapists at the games. It certainly rings an awful lot of bells for me too. I remember the 18-hour days, and somehow or other when we were young, we always found some time to get together and have a bit of a social life too. But later on, didn't do that as many times. But so thanks very much for doing that, and great perspective in terms of the role that you play as a medical person. And I'm looking forward to more questions at the end. Our next presenter, again, we're looking very much forward to Mike's presentation. And Mike is a member of the Canadian National Wheelchair Rugby Team, as Bryanna has indicated. And he has been a mainstay on Team Canada, competing in the last 5 Paralympic Games, where he won 2 silver, 1 bronze. He's been at 5 World Championships, where he's won 1 gold, 1 silver, 2 bronze. In 2 Pan Am Games, where he won 1 gold, 1 silver. And so he's got an awful lot of hardware. I'm told that he's going to have all those things, because to keep them, he's going to have them all bronze, so that they feel they can put them on his trophy and have them all bronzed up. So I don't know if that's the wise thing to do or not. But Mike has coached Canada's wheelchair rugby team as well at the Toronto Invictus Games, and he's been a speaker on TEDx Beacon Street event, and was recently, this is amazing, was recently inducted in the Canadian Wheelchair Rugby Hall of Fame. So congratulations, Mike, for that. And as Bryanna said, he has most recently competed in his 5th Paralympic Games in Tokyo. So again, he's recovering from jet lag, but I'm very much looking forward to your presentation, Mike, to give us an insight of what it's like at the games, and the kinds of things, the relationships, and the expectations you have of athletic trainers and therapists.
Thanks for the kind words, and thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited. It's just great hearing Marnie share, because I think one of the best parts about Marnie as an AT is she's a good person, and that helps our team. It helps me. And I think, the theme of communication has been talked about a bit, and her level of communication and commitment to us, at any point, any time, you can call Marnie at 3 a.m. and I know she's gotten calls at 3 a.m. and they're not always good ones, but that's who she is. And that's part of it. That's a huge part of our program. So she's definitely a cornerstone. We're lucky to have her. I was injured in 1999 in a car crash. I broke my neck. I broke C6, 7. And that was 4 weeks ICU, ventilation, no ventilation. Let's try a trach. Boom, the lungs are healing. So that's great. My lower left lobe of my left lung finally came around, which is great because it was touch and go. I'm pretty scary for the family. Then I did 2 weeks bed rest. And that's where the I don't want to be crippled kind of feeling hit really hard because you're no longer on a narcotic. And my first physio session was there in the 2-week bed rest. And I remember they basically lifted me up, put me on a blue foam mat in the hospital. And that was the physio room. And I just laid there. I just couldn't do nothing. I couldn't, my hands, at that point, my hands, so it was C6, 7. Initially, my hands were stuck like this. By about week 5, my hands kind of opened, but I couldn't use them yet. You know, I couldn't open a Snapple container, couldn't open up any milk. And, you know, I remember just laying on the blue mat, bawling like, this is me. You know, this is scary and crazy, but things change fast, fortunately for me. So I again end up in spinal cord rehab, see people that are more disabled than me, start with the physio protocol daily in the morning and some encouraging signs of recovery. So I started to get some fingers back. February 14th, 2000, I wiggle my big toe. So I get a little sensation lower. So these are all promising things for future health. And in spinal cord rehab, you know, you learn bowel, bladder, sit up, transfers. And that kind of gets spinal cord rehab in London, Ontario, and Canada is kind of the protocol. And that gets you on a trajectory. While I'm in spinal cord rehab, one of the local wheelchair rugby players is dating one of the nurses. I don't know this. The wheelchair rugby guys show up, a couple of them, female, male, and say, hey, you know, this chair thing is going to be all right. You know, and it's like, what? And hey, do you want to come to wheelchair rugby practice Tuesday night, 6 to 9 in Chatham? I'll pick you up. And, you know, it was like that. So the next thing you know, I'm hanging around with people that have been in chairs between 5 and 20 years. And they're like, do this, don't do that. So my recovery process just took off, you know. And then I get to see wheelchair rugby. I used to play hockey. If that's what you call it, I kind of play hockey. And, you know, I get to hang around people that look and talk like me as far as the chair thing. I see that they have jobs, they have spouses and cars, and life's going to be okay. And I got a sport to take off on. And I fell in love with wheelchair rugby. And my first nationals, I met the executive director, and I met the guy, he and his friends invented the sport in 1977. And I asked him, what do I do? I want to play on the national team. These guys are getting paid and getting kit, and they're heading to Sydney. And I'm like, you know, I was an apprenticing electrician, great profession. I was loving my life. But now all of a sudden all these doors opened up, which was really cool. So the inventor's like, do this, don't do that, and do this. And I'm like, okay. And I did it. And I made the team May 01 in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan at tryouts. Because of my sporting background, I had a lot of good instincts, and they saw something in me, which was tremendous. That's May 01. So I've been to 5 Paralympics, 2 silvers, a bronze. And my journey has been, it's been amazing. And people are like, what's your favorite Paralympics? And for me, they've all been different for a variety of reasons. And they seem to be a little less selfish reasons the last couple, which is a good sign for me. I'm kind of growing up a bit, I think. But so that's kind of my spinal cord injury story, my Paralympic journey. We've been fortunate on many levels, with medals, with the experience, with the travel, with the memories. And now kind of the networking, right, is taking off as I started to coach more and do clinics and camps. I've been fortunate because I kind of have, I have some experience and I have a lot to offer. So the athletic training part of things is like, I ended up marrying a physical therapist and athletic trainer. So, I was kind of fortunate, and it seems to be common in the spinal cord injury world where we marry PTs, ATs, and nurses. It just happens. But ice and foam rolling has gotten me 20 years down the road. It's crazy. I was telling a friend today, he's like, my trap's really tight. And I'm like, this is what works for me. So my shoulders, my shoulder health, I've taken it more serious. And my first 5-10 years, I just wanted to get so fast, but I was working all the wrong muscles. So with the shoulder health, the prehab, I bought into prehab. I bought into post training, post game shoulder icing. That's, as Marnie knows, please, can I get a couple bags of ice? And I've prescribed to that over my career. And I have, thankfully, I've been injury free, other than, I got a little bit of tennis elbow going on right now, which I laugh at because I'm like, that's fine. I'll take a little tendonitis at year 21. I can manage it. I'm not gonna. So, that's kind of the shoulder health thing. Marnie has a great protocol. She keeps an eye on us, and we do maintenance that way. Autonomic dysreflexia. So when you break your neck and you get to spinal cord rehab, they teach you about it because your body's going to communicate to you differently. Exactly. If you're not a non-sweater, like I kind of sweat half my face, but I sweat in odd areas of my body. So I'm a kind of sweater. But sometimes what happens to me if I have a urinary tract infection, or I have some type of infection, like say I've nicked my foot and it's pretty red and I haven't really looked at it much, I'll get pounding headaches. Sometimes when I urinate occasionally, I'll get pounding headaches and I'll get shivers, and the hair will stand up on my arms. And if those things are more intense, I have to look at other things, either, talk to Marnie, or, do I have a UTI? Or also my legs don't spasm a lot. I'm good with leg stretches. So if I'm on top of that and my legs start spasming a bit, I have muscle spasms with my stomach or my legs, it's telling me something else is going on. And that's important, right? And I, fortunately, from chest down, I have some feeling in my body, so I can kind of pick up on different cues, where the more disabled guys, the more paralyzed guys, they have to be really, really in tune with what's going on with their spasticity and their dysreflexia. The other thing AT related is overuse, right? So I've been pushing, I trained this morning for 90 minutes. I've been pushing my beach chair for 20 years, right? I'm doing a lot of pushing. So at about year 10, I was like, oh, I need to do a lot of pulling. So the ski erg has kind of been a game changer for me, because it starts to I get to scratch the itch where the ski ergs are going to make me feel fatigued. Like I'm on national team. I have to like find new ways to beat myself up, not only to be stronger, but to kind of, the psychological part is like, if I'm not training, like I have a hard time resting. And if I'm not training, I'm like, but I can only do so much forward movement anymore. So the ski erg and the sitting erg from my wheelchair rowing will fatigue me, make me exhausted. And in turn, it's giving me shoulder health. It's strengthening my back. So I've had to strengthen my back, which gave me a little bit of, I have a little bit of upper core, which helps with speed and agility, but it's also added to my shoulder health. So that has kind of been the overuse mitigator. So the ice, the shoulder health, the ski erg, and the rowing erg have been helpful. There's been times over the years I've run into MRSA, gym floors. We play on gym floors, quads. It's been so funny watching quads wash their hands, because like we're probably the worst. Like it's ridiculous. But so I've run into MRSA on the outsides of my knees. I had a bout with that. And I think what it ended up being is my chair was dirty, but I didn't know. So I get these little white pimples and it's like, oh boy, you know, and I went down the journey of, oh, I should probably touch this and pop it like a moron, right? Instead of going to the AT. Next thing you know, I'm on a flight and it's red and angry, and I'm at the doctor's office the next day, and I'm on, I forget what, there's a certain antibiotic that works really well for me, but there was like a year gap where all of a sudden, like it was MRSA, which is super dangerous because MRSA, I've seen it go septic on guys, and it can get really, really nasty early. So skin care and wound care, like Marnie said, it's just stay on top. And we've gotten better. Like, it's so funny because over 20 years, when I first was in gymnasiums, you know, everyone's pushing around, their shoulders are pronated like this, you know, people have skin sores. And so it's been really interesting to see over the years us get healthier as a population, because all we do with each other, especially newly injured, is do this for your bowel, do this for your bladder. You know, we talk to each other, right? So do these for your shoulders, you know, set your chair up like this. Oh, your everyday chairs, cushions, backrests. So, you know, as a community, we keep growing, which is great because, you know, quadriplegics can't buy health and health insurance, right? Like they're banking on us to die early, and we're like, nope. So the longer us quads live, the better. Like, it's like sticking it to the man type of thing, but it's kind of funny. So cooling vests, right? So for us, we've done a lot of testing with our physiologists with thermal regulation. We swallow a thermometer, they take our core temperature, and we go do heat acclimatization training. And we've done it in heat trucks, trailers, on rollers. We've done it outside on asphalt. And what we've learned is, you know, you can acclimatize the heat within 5 days, which is really interesting. So my blood plasma this past camp leading up to Tokyo was close to 13%. So can't really explain it because able bodies can't get 13%, and Zach or 3.5 can get that blood plasma increase through heat acclimatization. And the other really great thing is, after you heat acclimatize and get these gains, there's also cooling vests and cooling down, you know, so ice packs in the armpits, around the neck, and wearing a cooling vest, you can drop your core temperature really, really quickly. And that's going to lead to performance and decision making. Once I get hot and sweaty, my passes become short and less accurate, and I can't anticipate plays better if I'm getting hot. So we come off the warm-ups, depending on the gym or the location or time of year, and boom, Marnie's going to hit you with a cooling vest. And you know, not only psychologically, I'm like, I feel better, but physiologically, I'm going to get benefits as well. And it's been proven through our sports science experience. So that's the cooling part. I do, you know, I prescribe to the ice tubs. I jump in the ice tubs, you know, on the regular. For me, I can transfer well. I can get in, get out, dry off. Other quads, it's really difficult. They don't respond to ice tubs as well, just for a variety of reasons. But for me, it works really well. And I guess the other one thing, as far as communication, I just want to touch on was the importance Marnie plays in ATs in our past that plays game time in a role. So not only is Marnie a great AT, but she's a great friend. And, you know, there's been times where I've gone through some life situations where she's been an amazing ear and super helpful on many levels, either guiding me in the right direction, where to go, or to, you know, she'll listen to me. And the training room is a safe spot. We have a lot of fun, but we also get a lot done as far as I would say our mental health. And that's huge, because over the years, that's not always the case. So the training room is sacred. It's really sacred place. And it's a fun place, and it's a safe place. And we've had ebbs and flows in that regard. And it just opens up the door so much. And Marnie's got a keen ear. I know she's always listening, you know, to us talk during dinner or lunches. And that's her job, and she picks up on that stuff, and she knows when people are tired. And I'm sure she has many conversations with the coaching staff, like, hey, this is going on, or let's keep an eye on this. And I think that's probably half her job, is being supportive and being an ear and being that communicator. So yeah, thanks, Marnie. But yeah, and when I feel safe and I'm having I'm feeling healthy physically and mentally, when it's time to perform on demand for a medal, when I come off the floor, Marnie knows what I need, when I need it, and sometimes I don't need it, but she's always got a smile. She's always there on time, and she's always doing her job, and she can be counted on. And that helps for performance on demand. So if I'm coming off the floor and I just had 3 mistakes and I'm not happy and I have to go back out there, and then Marnie doesn't have my water, or I don't have a strong relationship with Marnie, it's going to affect how I feel, right? So the opposite is our medical staff, we trust. So our bench health is really good, and Marnie's part of what's going on the bench during timeouts, after games, pre-games. So I think ATs, she works these tremendously long hours with a smile on her face. You can call her anytime, and that all pays off when it's time to get to business on the court. So I just wanted to make a point of that. Sometimes maybe a young AT is not quite, maybe they don't know their value all the time. And when it comes to communication and being a good person, that is valued in our team. I know it is, and I've felt it. So I think with that, classification, I'm a 3-pointer, so my hands work pretty good. They're not fully strength. I don't have full left tricep. I'm missing part of it. Some of my muscles in my back and the left. I have a little bit of upper core, not a ton of core. I have some feeling in my body. So that classifies me as a 3-pointer. So that's the classification part. Spasms, bladder, sweat. I think I hit them all. So I'm so thankful to be here, and feel free to hit me with any questions, even if you feel like they're, I'll answer the questions. Thanks for having me.
Wow, holy smokes. Thanks a lot, Mike. That was really, really insightful and inspirational. And I think you gave us a real good rendition of you personally and the challenges you've had to overcome and thrive with. And it's great to get that kind of insight. I really, really appreciated the discussion you had about the value of the athletic therapist, particularly the fine work that Marnie does. That is just really, really reassuring to us who put those kinds of hours in, and it certainly is a credit to all the work that Marnie has done with your team. So I want to thank you for doing that, and I want to thank you for all the information you provided. We are now open for questions, and so under the Q&A, you feel free to put some questions in the Q&A, and we'll bring them up. Right now I have one here from Cindy, and Cindy is currently doing a master's degree in athletic therapy, and she also has a master's degree in exercise physiology. And she's asking, what advice would you give to someone wanting to climb the ladder to get to work with the adapted athletes? So I'll leave it to either any of you people to speak to that. Maybe Jess or Marnie.
I'll jump in.
Mm-hmm.
Great question. Thanks for asking. And my recommendation, and Marnie might have some information as well, but I would say get involved. Wherever you may be located, look for a local adaptive program, such as Wasatch Adaptive Sports, like we have here in Utah, that Bryanna did such a great job of talking about. and get out there and get involved and just, you know, see what it's about, see what sports they have, start volunteering and just get out there, because that's the best way, is to get experience. And then, you know, as you're working through your program, perhaps you can do an internship. You could contact one of our US Olympic and Paralympic Committee training centers. There are 3 of them in the US. So one's in Chula Vista, California, one's in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and one is in Lake Placid, New York, and see if they do internships. But a lot of things too is, don't be afraid to ask the question. What's the worst they can say is no. But just, yeah, get out there, see what's in your community, or what's maybe in a nearby city, if you're not in a big city, and just get out there and start figuring what it's all about. There are certain websites and things where you can just search. Disabled Sports USA is one of them, but they've recently changed their name and I can't think of what it is at the top of my head. I'll Google it right now and see if I can put it in the chat for you, because that might help.
And I'll just add, I would say similar things, just put yourself out there. When I got involved, I had no experience, no idea what I got into, no idea what I was doing, like not even close. I didn't have a clue. You end up doing a lot of research and figuring it out as you go. So don't let that be a limiting factor. You can only get experience by putting yourself out there and being vulnerable, and not be afraid to say, I have no idea. I don't know what this is. I don't know, like that is not an issue in a disability sport. And certainly you'll find athletes in parasport are very open. A lot have, you know, gone through some things and learned a lot about their bodies, and are most often quite happy to talk about it as well. So you're only going to gain understanding from having those conversations. In Canada, opportunities are a bit more limited. We do have like feeder systems and development systems in place, and there's certainly opportunities there. So I don't want to discourage anybody, but US specifically has a ton of programs out there. In wheelchair rugby, there's the USQRA that has like really big systems across the US, and volunteers I know are always welcome, but I always don't like to say, oh, you need to volunteer first. Like there's opportunities to get paid right off the bat, show up for tournaments. They need coverage for tournaments. Rugby is a full contact sport. There needs to be somebody present. So put yourself out there, and just take advantage of whatever you can, and meet people to make those connections, because I've found athletes in parasport, if they know somebody, it's very, like a helpful community. Everybody wants to help, and if they can help make the connections to the opportunities do exist. So put yourself out there.
And just a follow up, I didn't know anything about parasport either until I joined, and then and I had a similar experience to Marnie. So it's just such a wonderful family and community.
And I'll add one last thing, which Jess will appreciate. Classification, there are a million opportunities to get involved in classification, and there are not enough ATs in the system. And I just feel that ATs kind of bring something unique to the sport, because classification is medical and assessment based, but if you do not have an understanding of the sport, that can create big issues in classification. And like there's a lot of physicians, but not to diss on physicians, but they might have a different understanding of sport as we would as an athletic therapist. So opportunities in classification are for sure out there, and that opens a lot of doors as well, and a lot of travel opportunities and all those kinds of things.
I'm muted again. I just noted that Jess has put into the chat a website for moveunitedsport.org. So if anybody's interested in opportunities in the US, that might be a good place to look as well. So thanks very much for putting that on Jess. Bryanna, I wanted to ask a question just related to the work that you're doing with adopted individuals, more at the ground level, grassroots level, and what's been your experience? And you know, like you've told us, you've you've taken them from trying to teach them how to brush their teeth to being able to compete or to participate in sport. What's been your experience in terms of the psychological feeling that they get in when they're getting empowered step by the way? And how did they respond to that, and what do you get out of that?
That is an incredible question. Thank you for asking that. That is honestly the major reason why I'm in adaptive sports, even though I have a really nice full-time job that pays me really well, is because I call it my soul food. And the reason why I say that is because we come in, able-bodied. I work like 2 days a week with them, and I just show up and I'm like, what do you want to do today? What's your goal for today? What can I do to make that happen? And just creating accountability for them, so they have to tell me what they want to do. It's like, oh, I get to be independent. Like, I get to make my own choices of what my goals are. And sometimes, I'll work with a kid and all they want to do is have a snowball fight. So it's like, okay, we'll do that for a half an hour, but then we'll also do your ski or snowboard lesson. And then sometimes it's, like an older person who's like, no, I want to see if I can go 6 miles on my bike instead of 5. But I have these things that I have to deal with and trying to do that. It's like, okay, let's just see what we can do. And being able for them to choose their own goals and then to succeed in those is very empowering, because at least from what I can tell, and Mike can definitely speak to this too, is there's so many people in their lives that tell them no, or tell them, no, we can't do that. No, we don't think that that's possible for you. But just to want someone to say, I'm not going to say yes, but I'm going to say, let's try it. Let's see what we can do to make that happen. And for them to just be able to have that experience to really try to do something that so many people have told them no. It's like, I have a good friend of mine who wants to learn how to walk again, and their doctors told them that they couldn't, and now they can. And they have a T12 incomplete spinal cord injury. It's little things like that if you're just willing to say yes and you're willing to give them their accountability and decisions, it's incredible the things that you can accomplish. Because especially with spinal cord injuries, like, we don't know how nerves regenerate. Like, we have ideas, right? But there's really nothing in medicine that says a yes or no in terms of nervous system regeneration. So especially with those kinds of things, like, let's just see what's possible, because we don't really know what's possible.
Well, thanks very much, Bryanna. That's a great answer. I'm just going to ask Jessica, just maybe to build on what both you and Marnie were talking about in terms of your experience as a classifier, and what do you see your ATPT skill set, your knowledge, what does that bring to your job as a classifier that may not be as evident with some of the other people who are doing that? Like, what is it that's unique about your profession that you bring as a classifier?
Oh, sure. Great question. So classifiers have to have some type of medical license, right? So you can be an MD or a DO or an OT or a PT or an AT or that type. And then, as Marnie was speaking to, and isn't maybe as stringent as it could be, is some type of experience with the sport helps quite a bit. And especially what we see maybe more so over on alpine and snowboard is experience with the rules. Like, we might know how to ski and we like to ski or snowboard, but we don't maybe necessarily understand the rules of the sport. Anyhow, I think what I bring, and my colleagues that are, athletic therapists, athletic trainers, or physios, is our bedside manner, our ability to work with the athletes and make them feel safe and comfortable when they have to be in a vulnerable position. Because classification, if it's not explained well by a coach or a family member, is a scary time, and their teammates might be like, oh, you try to get this class, or oh, this is what it's like, and they're going to test you, and they're going to prod and poke you, and they're the scary classifiers behind the door in that dark room over there. We're like the Dementors in Harry Potter, right, under our cloaks. And really, we're not that way usually when we've had our coffee. But we essentially, I think it's that ability to find a way to relate with the athlete, put them at ease and make them comfortable, because athletic trainers are working with the athletes far more often than any other provider. I mean, how often do you see your doctor? Even traditional like physical therapy settings, it's maybe 3 times a week. And for especially like in Marnie's situation, she's living with these athletes. I mean, professionally, I'm not trying to say anything that's unprofessional, but like she's at camps with them. They're 24 hours a day, well, 18 hours a day, and you're around all the time. And, when I've been in environments like that here on campus, when I'm working with these student athletes, they're being seen 6-7 times a week sometimes, right? So we're in constant contact. We pick up on the nuances, like Mike was talking about. Marnie can look at me and understand that I'm having a bad day, or she picks up on things I'm saying. And I think that ability to read people and pick up on people you never met before, people who speak a different language than you do, that, like we've been talking about, that communication, that ability to adapt to situations, because even in a classification room, where you're supposed to bring your equipment and be ready and do all these different things, we still have to adapt to the testing techniques sometimes, or have to adapt to this athlete's situation. And we are definitely the MacGyvers of the bunch, I would say, along with our OT colleagues, that we can, with some, we'll say athletic tape instead of duct tape, and our Swiss Army knife and our water bottle, we can kind of get through anything. So I would highlight those skills for sure.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Jessica. Marnie, I was going to ask the question. You talked about sort of the physiological and the thermal regulation and blood pressure, and I think both you and Mike reflect on the fact that when those things are awry, that some of the things you get are going to be pounding headaches and sweating and maybe some muscle twitching. Do you do anything to monitor that ahead of time? Like, do you do internal thermal regulation monitors, or how do you monitor blood pressure? Keep an eye on that so that you can attack it before actually the person actually shows you the symptoms.
That's a good question. Yeah, we do a little bit of all of that, and we're privileged with our team. We do have a lot of support, so we have opportunities to do a lot of testing and collect a lot of data. And I appreciate that not every team would, but yes, we collect a lot of baseline information in a normal year, twice a year, where we're very aware of like what resting BPs are, because they're traditionally lower with a lot of the athletes as well, just to have an idea of what an emergency looks like. An issue we have in the hospital specifically related to blood pressure and in AD is if you're referring somebody to a hospital and the blood pressure is like, I don't know, 140 over 90, they might be like, well, that's not really that high. But if the resting blood pressure is half that, well, yes, it is a big deal. It's doubled. And you're not appreciating what I'm telling you, kind of a thing. So it's good to have that perspective and baseline information on everything. So we definitely do that from a blood pressure perspective. And if somebody's feeling off, it's something that you can easily check as well. Doesn't tell you the full picture, because obviously a lot of different things can affect your vitals as well. But with thermal regulation, we do have some base information as well. So we do a lot with the heat camps that Mike was talking about, collecting a lot of data. So they'll swallow the temperature control pills. So we get live readings when they're active and not active of what the core temperature is rising to. And then we put them through heat stress in different capacities to see what we can raise it to. So we have a lot of data that our physiologist collects that shows where people are on average, where they are within a warm up. So who needs to start pre-cooling to lower the core temperature before we start a game, and how quickly people recover as well. So we're lucky to collect a lot of that data. And then we just have techniques to help drop that. So it helps, like Mike said, oh, Marnie knows what I need. We're lucky because people play for like 21 years. So you're not switching over athletes left, right, and center. And we're living together like a third of the year. So you get like a lot of stored knowledge in that aspect. So I would know at what point Mike's going to start overheating based on how many minutes he's been playing and what I need to do to cool him down. So on the bench, regardless of practice or game, depending on the temperature in the gym and where we are, We use things that we have spray bottles to mimic sweating so that the athletes can have a water barrier on the skin to help promote the evaporation that way. We do slushies, so we do Gatorade slushies on the bench so that they can drink, and some prefer to cool down that way. A lot goes to personal preference because that makes some people cramp. So you kind of get to know what works individually for people. And we're trying it out before we're in major games, but the ice vest that Mike mentioned and cold towels and different stuff on the bench. So it's a lot of collecting data and trial and error in a controlled environment before you're in a competition environment to make sure that everybody has their individual routines and you kind of know what works, so that when you have to assess whether we're talking about vital related or temperature related, you know what an athlete needs and when routines aren't being followed and when you need to refer elsewhere if it becomes a more urgent matter.
Great, thanks very much for that. That's really interesting in terms of some of the things you have to work on that are unique to the population that you're working with, and some neat little tricks. I thought that was great. Mike, just one question here. It struck me when you were talking about shoulder health in particular, that you're talking in shoulder health, you're having healthy shoulders as an athlete to do what you have to do on the court. But also, you're also doing that same thing day in and day out, just in terms of your activities of daily living and part and parcel of your being able to move around. So can you maybe just sort of explain on, the importance of the vigilance of making sure that happens, because that transcends back to you as an individual having to function day to day. Athletes, if they've got a little supraspinatus as a volleyball player, well, they just don't raise their hands above their head and they can function pretty well. But in your case, you're still having to move a wheelchair around.
Yeah. Two things with that. One is long-term, and, it was interesting as far as when early on in the first 5-ish years, seeing people have shoulder issues in the same gymnasium as you, and they're, 40s, 50s, and they're getting surgery, and some of them, it's not good, right? Like a shoulder surgery for a 50-year-old quad, and then you see they don't rehab well. And that caught my attention early on. I was like, oh man, I'm in it for, I have kids, I'm in it for the long run, so I need these things to be healthy. And then the second part is, I don't want to sit the bench and I don't want to get cut from the team. And if I have a shoulder issue, that could be the end of my career. So selfishly, I'm like, nope. So I prescribe the maintenance, and part of my daily, weekly routine is, I'm always foam rolling. And I'll foam roll my shoulders, like the front, insides, and back, each of them, sometimes a half hour each. And that's what works for me. And I've been doing that for many years. And so now it's just a habit. And I mess around with a lacrosse ball or the new fancy vibrating foam roller. But regardless, is putting that time in. And I'm acutely aware of when I get tight. And when I get tight, I know I can mitigate it quickly. And so, treatment, massage is all in there, and it's all part of it. But, I will go to the Y, and instead of training, I'll go to the Y and foam roll for an hour, or a half hour, or 10 minutes, or watching TV, or in my bed. So for me, that's just, it's kind of like a body of work now, like 20 years, and they've been healthy, and I'm still, we do time testing for the last 20 years. And at 45, I'm faster than I was at 35 in a 20-minute sprint. My times are faster always. And that's part of it. There's a few things in there, of course, but I couldn't do that if my shoulders weren't healthy. So that's kind of the protocol that I've followed and learned from. And, Marnie and the staff, part of our warm-ups, there's shoulder stabilization exercise in our warm-ups. So keep us going.
Well, whatever you're doing right. and I think keep on doing it. In fact, I probably would like to maybe copy that little segment and have every one of my athletes talk, listen to that as well, so that they get the same perspective. So I have one question. We're probably just going to end up here, but I do have one question here, and I think this would be addressed to Jessica. And Chloe is asking about whether or not the adapted athlete and the athletic trainer module is available to international students. She's currently in the UK and would like to be able to avail herself of that course.
That's a great question. At this point, it is not, but the class is almost over for this year. But if we had a bunch of interest, then I don't see why we couldn't look into making it that way. So,
It's help
wow.
from some interest, Jess.
You're drumming up interest here. Then we could.
If you want to make something happen,
It's asynchronous online, so it'd be easy to do for our international or whoever wants to do it. So yeah, I can put I don't know how we would figure that out, but I'm happy to put my email in the chat if you'd be interested in that. And then I can go to my bosses with numbers. I'll put my email in the chat for y'all. Great question.
Yeah. So so that's a great lead in actually to my final comments. One of the reasons why we actually hosted this webinar, and in fact, I've got to give all credit to Bryanna, because Bryanna initially contacted me, wanted to become more involved in the World Federation of Athletic Training, and the more we talked about it, we kind of saw some of the interests that she had, and I thought that there would be this is a valuable group that should be collaborating amongst themselves, sharing information and sharing knowledge, and so we thought we would just dedicate one of our webinars to this topic area. But more importantly, going forward, it may be something like the module that Jessica has, but it may also be creating a bit of a group, an international group that the World Federation would be very happy to help facilitate, provide access to our communication network and our websites and our Facebook, etc., to be able to put together a bit of a special area group or a special interest group in the area of working with adapted athletes. And so to that end, if you are at all interested in doing that, then I would suggest that you just contact me, and I'll put my email address in. It'll be my university address, but I'll put that into the chat. And if you are at all interested in that kind of a group, then I'm going to be imposing on Bryanna as well to help us to start to develop a bit of a dialogue and an energy around this whole area of working with adapted athletes. So I'll just stick my email address in there. If you have that, we'll collect the database and we can be in touch with you with that. So we're kind of getting to the end of our time, and I want to really, really give a big thank you to our presenters. I thought that they all did a fabulous job of bringing us, the whole spectrum of working with adapted athletes. And I think you've really given us a lot of, demonstrated an awful lot of passion, and demonstrated in fact that there's an awful lot that we as athletic trainers or therapists get back from this experience. And I want to thank you very, very, very much for doing that. And Mike, I want to thank you too. You did a great job. This is, I know you have a busy time in your schedule, and I want to thank you for taking the time to do this and for sharing the way that you did. I'm going to take just a little bit of credit here from you, because my understanding is that wheelchair rugby was invented in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And so, it's a great, and I know I've actually at the University of Winnipeg, because we housed all the wheelchair sport athletes here for a number of years. So it's great to have that. And I want to thank Oli again and BASRAT for helping us with the logistics. And just to remind you again that immediately after this, it's just a very, very short questionnaire. We get a lot of information, a lot of feedback from it, particularly if you've got some ideas from other topics that you would like us to see presenting on the international stage. Please let us know that, and we'll follow up on that. So with all of that, the only thing I'm going to ask is, Oli, if you can send us, or the panelists and stuff, you can send us another link and we'll just do a quick little debrief for 5 or 10 minutes afterwards.
Yeah, sure.
We'll do that separately. So if the panelists, if you look for your email, we'll just do a quick debrief after this is over. All right. So I know this kind of anticlimactic when all we do is hit a button, everything is gone, but that's the way it's going to happen. And so thank you very much. And I look forward to hearing from any of you who are interested.
Thanks, everyone.